Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. That must mean it's time for your weekly Calamity Jane live stream because also it's a Monday. I did it out of order, but that's okay. James, how are you this evening?
Oh, I like the out of order. I think it's kind of cool.
Just
Like to
mixing it
kind
up a
of
little
keep
bit?
people,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, keep you on your toes a little bit. I'm doing great. It's funny, it feels like a lot lately we've been kind of throwing in weather a little bit. And this time around, I actually was surprised you did not throw in weather because I thought Georgia was going to get hit by, is it Hurricane Debbie or something? It's kind
Yeah,
of
Debbie,
hitting the
we're
East Coast.
we're way too far north for that. I think people
Mm.
forget how big a state Georgia is. It's
Uh-huh.
the second largest state in it is the second it is the largest state east of the Mississippi River. Um,
Okay.
so Savannah is getting the shit kicked out of it, um,
Mm-hmm.
and Middle Georgia is getting a ton of weather, but
Okay.
we're getting nothing. It's just with blue skies all day today.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because like sometimes, when I talk to family and friends, they're always asking, well, how are the fires in Los Angeles? And I'm like, well, Los Angeles is a big place too. And so
Yeah,
where
yeah.
Nathan and I live, we're lucky. We haven't really felt too much of that impact the past few years of when that happens, but kind of the same thing. It's not really a seasonal thing. It's more of a tragic thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, I kind of I kind of feel you. I get what you're saying. But yeah, I'm glad you're avoiding getting too soaked. So that's
Yeah.
good.
At this point, it's dry as a bone up here. I mean, we get these. It's that time of year, so it gets incredibly humid, and you'll like get these microbursts of storm systems that'll like dump a bunch of rain on you, and then just like dissipates because the humidity gets so high that the air can't support the moisture. Um, but other than that, it's been pretty boring here, boring and hot, very hot. Got up in
Hmm.
like the high 90s yesterday. It was not my favorite thing in the world.
Hmm.
But what are you gonna do? What are we working on tonight? Let's stop talking about the weather like old men.
All right, let me share my screen. Um, Today we're gonna hang out with Mitchell Winchester a little bit
All right,
tonight,
all
work on
right.
more of his stuff. So in the scene, I'm gonna work on this pose. I've worked on Mitchell Winchester the past, since our stream started. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes I've worked on some of these poses before, but this one I don't have any assets in here.
Hmm.
So I guess I'll work on this one. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna be at tonight.
Okay.
Um, or I'll make some neutral pose like this too for
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell. But it's funny, like once you kind of go down the rabbit hole of working on the cartoon, sometimes you kind of work on the same shots and you intentionally do that so you can replicate stuff. But I was kind of scanning through the file and I don't have anything else with this pose just yet.
Hmm.
But I was hoping maybe your banks would remember something like this particular pose, if I worked on our stream or not. I don't
I
know if we have that.
I only have memory of you working on Calamity in this scene. I don't have any memory of you working on Mitchell in this scene.
Okay, well that's good to know. So
Well, and
that's
Clem
where I'll
too.
be.
I know you've done
Yeah,
Clem
and
too.
Clem. Yeah, okay. That's good to know. And if not, if anything, I can look back at older files and see if I can find any other work I've done with Mitchell. But yeah, for all intents and purposes tonight, I'll be doing this pose here, this pose, and then his straight pose right here. We're just staring straight ahead. So yeah, that's the plan tonight,
It
and
works for
we'll keep
me.
on trucking. Yeah.
Works for me. Anything
So, but
exciting happening in the world of James tonight?
No, nothing really. This is the excitement right here. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and maybe
Uh-huh.
that speaks to your life is much more exciting than mine, I think, when you tell me about your excursions over the weekend. But
Yes.
this is the highlight of my week is when we hang out with you and we talk about random video games and stuff like that.
All
And
right.
I find it funny that when pre-stream, when we were getting ready,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned how frustrated you are playing the Nintendo Championship game, and it just brought back memories of that particular game that you were getting annoyed at having an
Yeah.
S rating on.
Yeah, it's not championship edition itself. I actually rather enjoy that product. It's I had forgotten how infuriatingly difficult Zelda 2 was. For, obviously for the NES. It is an absolute exercise in frustration, and it is no wonder that I didn't like The Legend of Zelda when I was a kid. So I did not play the original Legend of Zelda until I was much older. My first exposure to the Legend of Zelda was Zelda 2, and
Hmm.
it was an infuriating game, as I just mentioned, because the difficulty is so high, but it's not in a learnable way. It is
Yeah.
almost just there is this air of randomness. There's this air of just we are going to make this hard for the sake of hard, and there is nothing you can do about it other than get good, loser. You know, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it doesn't surprise me that as a kid I gave up on it and just decided that Zelda was a crappy franchise, right? Only to find out years later, playing Link's Awakening and a Link to the Past, and like, oh no, far from it. Zelda's really an amazing, franchise.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, um, and so yeah, so the last challenge for every one of the 13 games included is this sort of like epic longer speed run. So for Super Mario Brothers, you have to beat the entire game as fast as you can. For Super Mario Brothers 3, you have to beat all of World 1 as fast as you can. And, Kid Icarus, you have to beat the entire um, uh, Twin Bellows stage as fast as you can. And so on and so forth. And so the final challenge for Zelda 2 is beat the first palace as fast as you can. Well, the first palace is actually maybe the hardest palace in the game because they introduce these enemies that can two-shot you, but you haven't upgraded your sword. You've only got a basic defense spell. The final boss can hits really hard, and he's only got one or two pixels that are damage, right? That you can do damage to. And
Hmm.
I do remember because years later I went back and I played Zelda 2 again, did beat that dungeon, knowing how hard the game was. So I was able to like sort of plan for it, and
Hmm.
then um, got very very far into it. I actually never beat it because it got to this other section towards the end of the game that was just impossibly difficult. But I remember that first dungeon basically being the hardest dungeon in the game that I was able to get
Now,
to.
this first session is the boss, the horse face guy, the
That's the
horse guy,
boss. Yeah, the horse face guy. Yeah, yeah.
and you have to try to stab him in the head,
In the
right? That's
head.
the whole point. You have to
But
jump him only in the head. That's
but
yeah,
only
I
in the
remember that.
head. But you have to, and this is one of the reasons why it's such a bad game. Link's this early in the game, his sword is only about 4 pixels,
Yeah, it's
right?
awful.
And its
Yeah,
active
you're pretty
frames,
much yeah, you're fighting with a dagger, pretty
right,
much, right?
right, and the active frames are only like maybe 3 or 4 active frames,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so you have to be pixel perfect accurate to do damage to this guy. And for whatever reason, I did it. There was a challenge, just beat this boss, and I did it very easily. But now all of a sudden, I am having trouble finding that sweet spot, and so I have failed this challenge so many times. It's infuriating, and I put it down right before this call, and I'm like, I need to do something else, which is
Yeah.
a sign of me growing up. Because when I was a kid, when something like that would happen, I would just get furiouser and furiouser and furiouser,
Hmm.
and not understanding that the angrier I was, the worse I was playing, right? And it just
Hmm.
sort of became this feedback loop. And now,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got like, we've talked about this at length, but I've got so many other things I could be doing with my life. Like if a game frustrates me, it's like, all right, I'm just gonna go do something else. I don't need this, right? I got enough frustrations in my life as it is. I don't need to make a game of frustration. Games are supposed to be fun, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I put it down, and then I am now pleasantly on this call with you, and my zeal for anger will subside in time.
Yeah, it's a adding yeah, Zelda 2 is probably it's the weird it's arguably the weirdest one out of the franchise, out of the ones that I played at least. Maybe save the DS one with Spirit Tracks. That one was a
Oof,
little bit annoying too.
I
Those are the
yeah.
two, those are the lower tier. They kind of constantly battle for last place for me in the
Yeah.
Zelda line of games. I never played I don't know, it was on 3DO, whatever that one was where you played as
Oh,
Zelda.
the
So I
CDI.
don't know if
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
This.
CDI, yeah. So I have no opinion on that one, and I guess I could throw in, I think you and I both are agreement here. As much as we love to debate about some stuff, we both are pretty much on the same page with Breath of the Wild. We both didn't really like it. Although you powered through the entire game and
I
beat it,
did. I
so
beat it. I did.
powered, kudos to you because I didn't. I just gave up on that damn game. So I guess there's those top three. The out for me, they depending on the day and when I sort of the
Hmm.
bed I wake on, they all kind of fight for that last place for me. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I feel your pain for Zelda 2 in general. It was a pain in the ass of a game to play.
The only three Zelda games I never beat: Zelda 2, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. And I didn't play
Wow.
Tears of the Kingdom, so I can't include that in the list. Um,
Okay.
but I mean, of games that I spent time playing and didn't finish, it was the only three were Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and Zelda 2. And those are also my least favorite Zelda games. I like Breath of the Wild more than those three.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason why Breath of the Wild does stay higher up because it's just a more it's a quality made game. There's no issue
Mm-hmm.
with that. Just I just happen to not like the design choices
Mm-hmm.
for the game.
Yeah.
But
I
Spirit
mean,
Tracks and Zelda 2 torture chambers.
they are torture chambers, and the Phantom Hourglass, the idea of having to go back and replay the same dungeon
Yeah,
over and over again, but then
yeah.
this time you get deeper into the dungeon, and it was just like I don't know. This is another one of the classic examples which we bring up all the time. I know that there was some tester somewhere in the bowels of Nintendo that wrote a bug that says going back to the same dungeon over and over again is bad. We should do something else, right? Like I know that some designer somewhere while this game was in development
Yeah.
was like, don't do this. This is not fun. And I remember when the game came out and all of the reviews are like, well, it's pretty fun, except the whole you have to go back to the same dungeon over and over again. Like that, what was that about?
Yeah,
Um,
and what was the hook? Pretty much that they would change up the knight that lived in the dungeon. Like he'd just do different things. Is that
no,
what it
that
did?
was Spirit Tracks, the
That was
knight that
Spirit
you
Tracks.
control,
Okay, I didn't.
because Zelda's ghost inhabited a knight.
Oh,
Um,
okay, that's what it was. Yeah, that's right.
no, it was that it was on a time limit, and you had to get
Oh,
through the whole dungeon with a certain amount of time and a certain amount of time. And you're like, yeah, because that's the one thing I always thought was missing in Legend of Zelda was a timer. Um, and and then like you would every smaller dungeon, in addition to getting a new item and a heart piece, you'd also get more sand for the Phantom Hourglass, so you could
hmm.
stay in the dungeon longer, right? And you can make more progress and get farther down into the hellscape that was Phantom Hourglass's final dungeon. And I remember I got near the final boss, very very close to the final boss, and there was some drawing puzzle that I guess I completed, but then turned the game off, and I had to do it again, and I couldn't remember how to do the drawing puzzle, and I'm like, I don't care about this. And I turned it off, and I never went back after that.
Yeah, it was cool to try to use the technology of the DS. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that part
Mm-hmm.
I applaud Nintendo, with that. But yeah,
There was
yeah,
some
it's
fun
bringing back some
ideas in
pretty
it for
bad.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. Like, I forgot about the time of the hourglass, but I mean, bringing it back up. I mean, obviously it's called Phantom Hourglass. I just completely been so long since I played it. But it's funny because those issues about being stressed about time, I kind of felt that way with Majora's Mask.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, I'll still go back to play it, but I did put it down for that same reason. It was giving me anxiety, like, oh my gosh, got to
Mm.
get this dungeon done in a certain amount of time. So why do you think that is? That because I'm sure you have Majora's Mask up in the higher,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it's
Top
higher up there, right?
top three
Top
easily. Yeah.
top three. So what? So why is it that one gets a pass, but yet Hourglass does not?
Because the for
I'm just
me,
curious.
yeah, so for me the even the initial timer is pretty generous, but then once you learn the song of slowing or whatever,
Oh, then you
this
get ways to work
the
around
song
it.
of halftime, then you can go for like an hour almost without
Okay,
having to reset the
all right.
time. And so it never really bothered me. And also too, it is it would there's a little bit of a consistency. In Phantom Hourglass, the only dungeon in the entire game that had a timer was that one special dungeon. All of
Mm-hmm.
Majora's Mask was built and designed around this timer. And so early on in the game, the timer was a bit of a hindrance, but you learn you learn the song of slowing or whatever it was called pretty quickly,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then things get a lot more manageable. And also because the entire game was designed around this repeating the 3 day thing again, the content was a lot more. It was chunked up into smaller bits, right?
Hmm.
And so there was this um uh, uh there was intention in how they designed the game as a result, right? Knowing that there's going to be these 3 days you're going to play over and over again, they built the game around smaller play sessions for the most part. And then and so the timer worked with the design of the game instead of against it. Now, I mean, there are some pain points. I'm not going to say that it's a perfect game. For instance, you always had to make sure that no matter how far in the day you were, if it was at the point that you were going to go attempt the dungeon, you needed to make sure to
Hmm.
reset time, fast travel to the dungeon, so you have the entire 3 day cycle to complete it. Because if you didn't complete it in the 3 days, all of the puzzles reset, even though you kept like any major treasure chest. So like if you got the map and the compass and the new item, you got to keep those, but everything else in the dungeon reset, right? And so generally speaking, the way I always would approach a dungeon in Majora's Mask is as soon as I got to it and accessed it, I would immediately reset time to the first day, fast travel back to the dungeon, and then attempt it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and some of them like, oh, I don't remember. I feel like the time of day or the day, which day it was, actually changed the nature of the dungeon. So there was an aspect of that too. Um, but in any case, yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why Majora's Mask, the timer on that didn't bother me, and I think the biggest one is just because it wasn't so punitively short, and because the entire game was built around that timer. So the content timing and the content pacing took that 3 day cycle into consideration.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's something I don't think I got far enough into the game to get to that point, so I was still having a lot of anxiety just playing it.
Mm,
Like, "Ooh, I don't know if I would even want to start this next session." And also, it's an interesting game. I don't love it or hate it yet. I mean, it's been a while since I played it, and I'll probably fire back up soon. But it just felt it's even now it's the most unique Zelda I think I've ever played.
mm-hmm.
It's just so there's something creepy about it, but
Mm-hmm.
yet it's so cute. It's still got your I think your child link for the most part, at least when
Mm-hmm.
how I'm playing it
Mm-hmm.
right now. So it's still got that cutesy factor to it, but yet there's the sense of dread, and then seeing that giant moon coming at you with that creepy face, kind of staring at you in at different intervals. I think that probably adds to it. But yeah, there's a sense of dread and
Mm-hmm.
despair in the game that none of the Zeldas, maybe except for possibly Twilight Princess, where I get that sense with it. But even Twilight Princess didn't feel. I still felt hopeful somewhat, even in that game. But in Majora's Mask, no hope. Kind of. It was like almost like, gosh, I don't want to have the world end again, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the game was about the end of the world, right? And
Yeah.
I also think too that there is something to be said that there are every NPC in the game is named. Every NPC in the game has a story arc, and it could be a relatively short story arc, but every NPC had a story arc in that game.
Hmm.
And um you get to know these characters, and you get to know who they are and where they're going in the last 3 days of their existence, because you repeat it so many times, right? And like,
So does this help build like kind of like you actually have some stake in caring for this character and not wanting them to die when the
mm-hmm,
evil moon comes down?
mm-hmm,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
you know the main sort of side quest storyline has to do with two characters, Keifi and Anju. I think I don't remember uh off the top of my head for sure, but basically they were supposed to get married. The Deku kid wearing Majora's mask curses Keifi to look like a child, and you have to like bridge the gap and reunite these two lovers before the end of the world, right? And it's a quest you can't compete right away. You have to slowly unlock progress towards it, and it takes almost the entire game for you to have all the tools and have all the necessary masks to get them to make the right decisions to have them wind up at the end together on the final day. And in fact, their storyline concludes in the final minutes of the final day. Like you're watching them reunite as the moon is like collapsing onto Clocktown. um,
Uh-huh.
it's very cool, and it is one of those rare examples where I think that it was storytelling that was done well in the game because it leveraged the game mechanics. It wasn't just this patina over top of the surface of the rest of the
Hmm.
experience. It was so foundational and integrated into the rest of the gameplay, that it is one of those rare instances that I found it incredibly compelling.
Hmm. Does this indicate, like, from what you're telling me, I don't mind spoilers. The game's been out
Mm.
for
Yeah, the
gazillion years
statute
now.
statute of limitations
Yeah,
is
it's
definitely
over.
up on
Yeah.
that one.
So do you have multiple endings in this game, or is there only one true ending that's the only way you can beat the game and get the credits? Like, how does this game work?
I
Because
mean,
I mean, I've already blown up the world once or twice. I
yeah,
recall.
yeah. I mean, I guess you can consider that an ending,
Yeah.
right?
So is that an ending? Yeah.
Um, yes and no. You can get an ending where you don't get collect all of the masks, and you can get an ending where you do collect all of the masks, and that's the only difference, right? And the only way you can get the wedding mask, which is your reward for completing the couple storyline, um, is you basically have to have every other mask in the game. It's the
Oh.
last mask that you are capable of getting, right?
Okay. All
Um,
right.
and so that's the only difference, right? Is whether you have that mask or not. If you don't have that mask, it's because you don't have all the other masks. Um,
Hmm.
and so um, yeah, so there's like the I have all of the masks ending and the I don't have all of the masks ending. And I will tell you, it is in your best interest if you do revisit it to make sure you get all of the masks because
Okay.
the final boss is much more difficult if you don't get all of the masks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know. Good tip to know. I'll be probably flying it back in up again. I recently ordered. I got a new Nintendo 3DS from
Mm-hmm.
Japan and
Mm-hmm.
did custom firmware on it. So I'm playing some of these games again, that I've had, and I was able to pop in my Majora's Mask US cartridge and kind of play it and stuff like that. I was like, okay, I'll probably play this on the new Nintendo 3DS and actually play this in 3D. And like, and although we're doing this at this, we weren't talking about 3DS really much on the stream before, considering that the 3DS came out in what, 2011.
Yeah, it
At
was a
that
while
time when it
ago.
yeah, it's a while ago. At the time, I thought it was such a gimmick, and I wasn't gonna buy it. But man, playing the 3DS, and like actually using the 3D, it's a pretty cool feature. And I was
Mm-hmm.
completely wrong, and I misjudged that. I think it's really fun and really adds a breath of fresh air to some of these games. So yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying playing it. And yeah, Majora's Mask is on the list, and that's why
They
we're
do
talking about
some,
Zelda. So I had to just
yeah.
yeah.
They do some really fun stuff with the 3D and Majora's Mask. I'll tell you that much.
Okay, that's cool. So
And
I'm assuming you played everything in 3D on the 3DS. Did you even have a 2DS at all or
no,
no?
I never owned a 2DS. I've only ever had a
Okay,
3DS. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I was one of those people who didn't get headaches from it. I had a couple of friends who just got horrible headaches from it and never
Okay.
used it, but it never bothered me for whatever reason. Um, Maybe it's just because I'm so blind. Like I don't know. It's just like the whatever would induce a headache for me doesn't work just because I'm blind as a bat. I have no idea. But suffice it to say, I never got headaches from it, so I would always play in 3D. And um there's some really really fun ones. I never beat it, but Resident Evil Revelations, the first one, it looks really
Uh-huh.
cool in an actual 3D. Like you pump the depth slider all the way up. It's pretty
Okay.
cool. And then Pilot Wings Resort is also really cool. And it is one like do you remember in the era of the Wii, they were trying to popularize this persistent world called Woohoo Island, and it would show up in a bunch of different games. Um, all of the Wii Sports games. Yeah, Wii Fit. Um, not all of the Wii Sports games, not the first one because the first one was just sort of a standalone. But Wii Fit, Wii Sports. It showed up in like Mario Kart. It showed up in Super Smash Brothers. And then it also showed up in Pilot Wings Resort. And
Okay.
it's really cool to have this really consistent, familiar island that you can continue to explore across all these games. I thought it was a great concept. I'm kind of ashamed, not ashamed, but I'm kind of sad that it never really got a larger traction beyond those couple of games that came out. But the whole game takes place on Woohoo Island, and it's the typical, Pilot Wings fare. You've got parachuting, you got hang gliding, you've got um, airplanes, jetpacks, the whole nine. And it also uses the 3DS aspects of the 3DS extremely well.
Hmm. That's good to know. I didn't know that Pilot Wings and all those games shared an island together.
Well, Pilot Wings
I have
Resort, like Pilot Wings 64 and the original Pilot Wings are their own thing,
mhm.
right? But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, their own thing. Yeah. But I mean, but I had Wii Fit, I had Wii Sports. I
Hmm.
got Wii Sports on the Switch. I didn't even make a connection. They were all
Oh,
the same island.
it's not anymore. Like that was
Okay.
only, yeah, after the 3D, like sort of when the Wii U era started, they sort of dropped the
Okay.
they dropped that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it does sound well. It potentially sounded cool. It's a bummer that it's gone away, but
Yeah, again, and you can continue like I mean, I thought it would have been really fun to because the island had a bunch of different areas like a volcano and a hotel, and it would just be a
yeah.
fun little like okay, so you know how Nintendo have and they haven't done one recently. They did one on the Switch a couple years ago, the Clubhouse game series, where it's just a bunch of
Uh-huh. Yeah.
series of different parlor games.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been cool, like if they had the next Clubhouse games was on Woohoo Island, but it was just in the casino that was in the hotel district, right?
Oh, that would have been cool. Yeah, it would have been
I mean
a
that's like,
justification for it.
yeah, even if you're just using it thematically, I thought it was kind of a cool little thing, but for whatever reason, it never really caught on. Which whatever. But I always thought it was a nifty little idea.
Hmm.
Um,
Cool. Well,
yeah. So
that's a little tidbit.
yeah, yeah. So there you go. I mean, I can recommend. I mean, 3DS was honestly up until the Switch maybe my favorite Nintendo system ever made.
Yeah, it seems to be the general consensus that it's one of the top consoles ever made.
Hmm.
I don't know whether it was because of the 3D gimmick part of it or just the library of games were on it that were so strong. I'm not sure.
Well, it
But
was
yeah, I always kind of wonder about that.
yeah. The 3D aspect was I always found fun. It was never a deal breaker for me. I mean, I would play games in 2D if the battery was low or anything like that. It was, yeah, it was definitely the library of games. There's no question about that. But it was all the extra stuff that existed beyond the scope of just the games. There was the Street Pass system. There was um, the mini games that you could play with the Street Pass, and they did a massive expansion to that. In the latter half of the 3DS's life, they added this thing called the 3DS Badge Arcade, where you could play these capture games and unlock badges that you could decorate your 3DS home screen with, right? You could
Okay.
change the themes of the operating system. You could, I mean, it was just like, and then beyond that, like, Capcom played around with transferring save files from the 3DS to the Wii U with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. And the 3DS was just this incredibly versatile um, you know, just extremely well thought out system that had and a bunch of amazing games and a bunch of really great value propositions beyond the device as a simple gaming platform. I mean, for a long time, every year that I went to the Penny Arcade Expo because I was living in Seattle for most of the lifespan of the 3DS,
Hmm.
um, you would go and everybody had their 3DS. They actually had areas of Penny Arcade that were called 3DS lounges, where you could just
What?
go. They had bean bags, they had chairs. You just go, and all it was is you would do street pass with everybody around you, and you would collect your me street passes, which unlocked hats and things that you could decorate your Mii's in, and they had
Wow.
all these like puzzle pieces you could complete these puzzle pieces to get these like dioramas, 3D dioramas of all these different like games, and they were constantly adding new ones as new games came out. Um, and it was just it bred this like culture of street pass, and every once in a while on my like TikTok or Instagram reels, um I'll get like people will go to conventions with their 3DS to see if there's anybody still out there who's doing street pass,
Oh,
and sure
that's
enough
kind of
they always hit like one or two people. They always get a street pass even today. um
wow.
yeah,
I
and it
had no
had like
idea.
and it had like a
Yeah.
walking pedometer. So like you would every like certain number of steps you'd get a play coin, which then you could use to unlock stuff in the 3DS's like stuff. And some games actually use those play coins. Like for instance, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 3DS edition, which I know you're playing. You
Hmm.
actually unlocked the gallery mode where you could look at the different 3D models. You unlock those by using play coins, and the play coins you get by walking. Right? It was just like this really everything about the 3DS was just perfect. It was just this great little system that could. Um, it had amazing games, but it was just so much more than the games. It was the entire value proposition of that system. It's just nothing will ever match it in terms of its overall package, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no, I mean, yeah, I completely missed out on that whole lifespan of the 3DS. I got everything post after like I only started getting I got a 2DS a couple years ago because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to do the 3D because I hated on the original 3DS completely because it was kind of making me feel kind of wobbly with it. But so I tried it with the 2DS. I was like, oh, okay, this is just a DS, but now it's just a more powerful processor. Okay, I'll play this eventually one of these days. And I got Majora's Mask and all that stuff on it. Then of course, then PS4 was around. It just was another console to me, like the
Mm-hmm.
DS was.
Mm-hmm.
DS was a great console too. I loved it. I love the dual screen aspect of it. All that was really neat. But man, from what you're saying, there's a whole like you were pretty much saying, like it's just a whole level of community that came with it that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know existed. Like I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea until you and I were talking about it now. I was like, what? I always saw Street Pass, in the OS, and I was like, what is this? It's just me stuff. I had me stuff on my Wii. Okay, I get
Mm-hmm.
it. And then that's it. I kind of flippantly just kind of just disregarded it after that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I have really good memories of the 3DS community. Most of the 3DS lifespan, I was working. Well, not most of it, but when the 3DS really hit its stride was um, in like 2013, 2014, and that's when I was working at Airtight Games, and
Hmm.
we would when a new game came out, the number of hours that I spent during lunch in the main conference room playing Monster Hunter or Pokemon or some other multiplayer game. I have really really good memories of just the community that the 3DS created just because of all of its how easy it was to connect to other people, right? You could connect locally, you didn't have to connect online, which is obviously a feature that they kept from that point on.
Hmm.
Um, but it was also fully supported online play, and it was just ugh, I mean, I don't know, man. I could talk forever about all the ways that Nintendo figured it out with the 3DS. And it's the biggest thing that I always thought was missing with the Switch. Now the Switch is, I mean, great. Like there's no, you know, uh, besmirching the good name of the Switch. I mean, you can besmirch it, but I mean, it's a great platform. But the thing
Hmm.
that I always missed about it was that sort of community building aspect of Nintendo's mission statement for the 3DS is, well, not mission statement, but their mission with the 3DS was, this is a handheld system. We want you connecting with people, and we want the 3DS to be the way with which you connect to people, right?
Uh-huh.
And I always thought that was missing with the Switch. The connect and the building of a community kind of features that were so endearing for me on the
Yeah, I mean,
3DS.
it sounds endearing just for me describing it now, even years later after, and like this is post shutdown of the
Oh
whole
yeah,
online
yeah.
store. Now
They
everything's it's just a graveyard now.
yeah.
All those things that you're talking about, these are all things like this feels like I feel like I'm an episode of the Amazon show Fallout where I'm
Mm,
watching the landscape of what was
mm-hmm.
when I go in there and I start playing my games and I play the games, but like there's a whole sea of other stuff that you could potentially do with it back in its heyday. That's just sad now. Now I'm kind of bummed
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's
I
not
mean,
around anymore.
and the thing is I don't know that you can. It was just they managed to capture lightning in a bottle. They launched a system when society, I guess, or gaming culture wanted something like this, was looking for something like this.
Uh-huh.
They supported it, extremely well. It was just this absolute lightning in a bottle, and I don't even know that you could capture that again, right? I don't even
Yeah, I
know
don't know
that
if
it
you
would be
can.
possible to replicate that. Everything has changed since the 3DS came out about how we consume technology, about how we interact with each other on a societal level, what the nature of community is, um,
Yeah.
and I just don't know that it would find the same audience the way it found an audience back in the early 2010s. So,
So for me, my perspective on the 3DS and the 2DS as well, and even the DS is I always like the OS
mm-hmm,
on those handheld devices.
mm-hmm,
And then when the Switch came out, and again, I because I had none of that experience with 3DS, 3DS would probably be my favorite console of all time, but because I had none of that experience, the Switch is my favorite console period of all time at this point because I can do so much with it, like work out with it, play games,
mm-hmm,
whatever.
mm-hmm.
But the thing about the 3DS and the DS, well, and the more it's more leaning towards the 3DS. Is just the OS was really cool. It was customizable. You could do all kinds of stuff with it, change colors, and I just thought it was just a slicker OS to work in
Mm-hmm.
and to play in and to do
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And the Switch is just so rudimentary. It's just you just
Yeah.
go left to right and you just find your game. Like it's clunky, it's cumbersome. Even after all these years, it's been out for no, what, almost a
Since
decade now.
2017. Yeah.
Yeah, and it still hasn't had any updates whatsoever to that OS or nothing. Like where you can actually customize it to make it kind of your own. And I just find it shocking that Nintendo, as big as a giant company, would not try to replicate their OS or what was considered a success for users, user experience from one OS to another. It's like a whole dev team designed the Switch OS.
It does seem
I
like
don't know.
it should be written programmer graphics do not use on it.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, I
Um,
couldn't. Their philosophy was they wanted it to be dead simple. They wanted it to be as little overhead as possible.
mm,
I mean, I would assume that the OS footprint on the internal memory of that
oh,
platform
it's
is
got to be
practically
nothing.
nothing, right?
Yeah, I bet it is.
And
Yeah,
they just, for whatever reason, decided that for the Switch, it was going to be extremely utilitarian and very simple, and they weren't going to futz with it, and then they leaned
they
into
did.
that.
Oh, they did.
I mean, I
They
don't
did.
mind the I mean, yeah, I did like all the Googads and Gigaws of the Wii and the Wii U and the 3DS.
Hmm.
I
Sure.
really loved. I mean, like the Wii has some of the best theme music of all time, and it was in the
Yeah.
shop and it was in the Me channel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, I mean, like those are bangers, man. I mean, like people still do like rock covers of the eShop, or the Wii Store theme. I mean, it's just absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. And the Switch, there's nothing. The one thing I will say that they really should have done something about, and I'm curious to see how they approach it with their new platform. The eShop on the Switch is garbage. It's terrible. Discoverability is awful.
Oh, it's so
It's
bad.
sluggish. It's slow. The search is terrible. how it's organized is
Everything.
garbage. I mean, there's just nothing good about how they handle the storefront
Nothing.
on the Switch.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah.
I have nothing good to say about how the store is handled on that platform. And the fact that they didn't make any effort to improve the user interface for that is maybe my biggest disappointment with that platform. Now, I mean, I've always known what I've wanted, so I've been able to go in and just buy it, and so it's not
Yeah.
the end of the world. But now that I
Yeah.
work on a small indie game that
Ugh.
is, available on the Switch, and you you realize how awful discoverability is on that platform when you're working on a game that is trying to find an audience on that platform,
Yeah.
um, and unless as an indie studio, unless you somehow get into the good graces of Nintendo and they feature you on one of their directs, or if you have a publisher who is going to put a big spend behind you to try to get you some FaceTime in front of consumers, man, it is an uphill battle to have people find your game, right? Um,
Yeah.
I went to DreamHack Dallas back in May to show off the game, and it was great.
Hmm.
And you meet a lot of people, and the game has a ton of fans, and it
Hmm.
always surprised them. They're like, "Wait, this is out on Switch?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know." So it's like,
Ah.
"Yeah, see, that's right. Like, how do you fix that, right?" Um, and so anyway, you just kick at the problem, and hopefully an audience will find it eventually because it's a great game, um and hopefully it'll bubble to the surface. But and Nintendo really doesn't support support games either, right? It's like unless it's like a chosen subset of games, which they do choose to support. But I mean, and look, they can't support every game. I get
Yeah.
that, but
Hmm.
they don't do anything. Like, they don't even go to the level of what Valve does, where they'll at least like feature as many games as want to in a particular sale, and they'll organize. Steam will organize the different like types within a genre or blah 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 blah, and they do all of that on their own, right?
Hmm.
And even that is so far more advanced than anything that Nintendo does for their sales and promotions and things like that. It's Yeah, I mean, the eShop is, in my opinion, the biggest failure of the Switch platform, far and
Yeah.
away.
And you would think that it'd be in the best interest to the more promotion, the more sales you get off your shop, the better it is for Nintendo. It's healthier for Nintendo. And it
Mm-hmm.
just, but yeah, for whatever reason, I guess they just print money to where they still have to care,
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's the end of the day.
to a certain extent, it's just like, what are our priorities here?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, people don't like it, but it's not stopping them from playing or buying the games. So where is our, ROI on redoing? I mean, I'm sure that some bean counter did a P&L on we
Yeah.
could spend the money to make the eShop work better, but what is, do we
But why?
see? Yeah, but why? Right? We're not seeing.
Yeah.
We run the numbers, and we're not seeing a significant boost in game sales. So like, why do it, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, I'm certain that is largely what's going on there. Um,
Also, I think I don't know. I don't know whether it's through Reddit threads or whatever. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But I thought they pretty much adopted the Opera browser for their to let you use their internet browser and
mm-hmm,
or their shop. So there's already a
mm-hmm.
limitation there because who knows if that's really the case. They have a true browser doing stuff like that, and it's not even. I don't know who uses Opera.
Nobody uses Opera.
Nobody uses it. So, and there's probably a reason why. After using the shop, you can kind of see why.
Opera
But it
has
makes me
been
wonder if some,
yeah.
yeah.
Opera's been the
Um,
browser that they've used since the original DS.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting into weird video game
Yeah.
esoterica, but the original DS didn't have a built-in browser, but it did have a browser that came with, it was on a game
On a
card,
cartridge.
and then it
Hmm.
had a
Yeah.
Game Boy Advance pack that you slipped in that was the extra RAM to supported caching the website, and it was terrible.
That's
It
hilarious.
worked horribly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then yeah, when they released the DSi, that's when it had the built-in browser,
Hmm.
and every system up until the Switch had a built-in web
Yeah.
browser, and they all ran on Opera.
Yeah.
And at one point in the early days of the Switch, hackers discovered a backdoor that you could launch into the Google from the eShop if you did a series of things, and so you could actually like sort of hack in an internet browser onto the Switch by hijacking the browser window that the eShop exists in. And so it was pretty funny, but Nintendo patched that out as soon as they
Yeah.
could.
Of course they did. Yeah.
And I mean,
Well, that's
I guess I don't have a problem with it. Doesn't I mean, I never browse the internet on any of my Nintendo platforms anyway. Like, why? That's so weird.
why. Yeah,
But
agreed.
anyway,
Um, I think we're in a pretty good spot. I mean, as far as Calamity Jane stuff's tonight, like, I got two poses in,
all right,
so yep.
yeah, there we
So
go.
Mitchell is ecstatic, and then goes back to the natural. Let me see how you react
Yeah,
state
yeah.
to my audience state. So
Huh?
so I think we're in good shape here for tonight.
All
That's a good
right,
stopping point.
sounds good. Well, we'll call it there then. Head on over to calamitygame.rocks. That'll take you to our Patreon site. Please consider subscribing to us and helping us make this cartoon a reality. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook, which presumably you have since you're watching the stream right now. We're also on Instagram. We post links to the streams, and we'll occasionally post other goodies up there too. So take a look at that. Consider subscribing over there as well. But we won't be back next Monday. I will not be here. I will be traveling for work next Monday. So, James, I think you're going to go solo next Monday.
Yeah. So for the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to be doing this kind of lily pad thing, hopping around where I'll fly solo a couple, here and there. I think maybe like
Yeah,
next week I'll go
next week,
solo.
and then the week after I'll be back, and then I'll be gone
Yeah.
again the week after that
Yeah.
because doing
Because
a
of
lot of work
PAX.
travel. Yeah, I'm going to Penny
Yeah.
Arcade again for the first time in nearly a decade, honestly. I'm going back to the Penny Arcade, but I'm going to be working it again. I'm not going as a fan.
Yeah. 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 That should be fun though to
Hmm.
go to old stopping grounds. So
Yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to be back. But in
cool.
any rate, so yeah, James is going to be flying solo next weekend, and then in not next week, but the week after, so 3 weeks. So yeah, he's got some fun stuff cooked up for you guys to take a look at and watch. But in the meantime, I will see you in 2 weeks. James will see you in 1 week. Till then, stay tuned, and we'll be back. Stay safe out there, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Night.
Good night.